Hey guys, I'm calling this a new beginning on my tank plug. The reason is I was doing it the way I usually do it, which is pretty difficult for a first timer. So I was thinking it's probably going to get confusing, and it's a lot more work, a lot more difficult, but I'm used to doing it. So I figured I didn't like the way the plug was turning out because I had to add the extension there. So I decided just start all over again with a new block I built last night. And so I'm going to do it. It's a lot easier way to do it this way. So so it's easier for you guys to follow. It's never done it before. Basically, same thing. You figure out your height, length, and width of your tank. Subdivide everything on every side, top, bottom sides. And then what you want to do is you want your full-scale drawing. And so the guys that watched before know this is a 69, 70-ish Suzuki 125 Stinger tank. Just an awesome, cool little tank I've really liked. And so basically, start over. You need, when you're making it, you make this full size. And then, I probably said before, I don't cut the bottom. I leave that squared out from the paper. So you can actually take that and match it to the foam corners. At least the bottom one corner and the bottom there. And that's what I've done. And then I've done my outline. It's not quite right, but I've done my outline there. And this way you do it on this side, then you do it the opposite way on the other side. And basically this is how you start on the process here. So you just end up with this on both sides. So I'll start cutting and show you what happens now. See you guys. Okay guys, video 2. Pretty simple. I've just taken a regular old hand saw. And just cut the corners. Now what I'll do is I mark the front and back at the farthest point, so that way you can kind of keep an eye on so you don't cut low in the center there. And I just did that on the front and back. And you don't have to get really close because the filing goes really quick there. So so the front and the back is marked right at the farthest point. And just kind of be careful and just rough cut it in. And that's the first step. It's real easy to do this way. Okay, see ya. Okay, here's part 2, video 2. Now, what we've done here is we did the rough cut with a saw. Now with your bastard file, I love saying that, what you want to do, see if we can get an angle here, is cut this at a pretty good angle, maybe a 45-degree angle. And what you want to do is just file this down to close to the line at a 45-degree angle. And you want to do that on both sides. And then once you do that, you have a line, you actually have a low line here and here to when you start filing to match. What you're doing is just, you'll need some type of long straight edge. Oops, let me grab this again. A long straight edge, and just keep your eye on it, because you know that side and that side's right. And so you can just take a straight edge and come down and see where the high spots are, and just move yourself all the way down, down, down like that until she's pretty much showing no air on both sides. Now you can see I'm a little bit high right over here, right over there, you can see that. But just go slowly with your bastard file, and you don't have to get totally exact. Get as close as you can. So that's kind of part 2 of that. Okay guys, part 3 of video 2. So we rough cut the shapes. I showed you how to do the really rough cut. And now what I've done basically is I've just taken some fine sandpaper and a sanding block, and you cut the edges first, get them close. Can you see that right? Yeah. Get them real close there, and do just like you did with the other. Sand it flat, and then while you're doing that, just kind of get your straight edge and just move it, and just that'll tell you where your high spots are. So just move it a little bit here and there, here and there, here and there. And basically, this side, there's a high spot right here a little bit, and I could feel that. It's kind of a break there. Can't see it though. But this section is done. So now we just have the back section to do. So that's we're making a lot more progress than we were before. We're doing it. This is a lot easier way. So there you go, guys. See ya. Just a quick step 4 of video 2. Using the fine sandpaper, we've got our shape all the way around on top. So it sure looks a lot better once you sand it. But see how easy and quick that went? Cool. Okay, guys. Video 3, I guess. Reboot. Did the smooth top, rough cut and smooth yesterday. Today I spent about probably half hour to 45 minutes cutting in the bottom, and I did it just like I did before. What I could take out with just a regular hand, so I did. And then I rough cut it again with a bastard file, and then just some fine sandpaper to finish it off. Again, you use a straight edge to find the high spots, but now we have full side shape, which is good. I've added, let's see if you can see the top and bottom now, curvature. So had to do a little modification on the steering neck hole. It needed to be bigger. So so not a lot done today, but she's coming along. So there it is. Hey guys, video 4. Tank plug reboot build. As I showed you earlier today, I've done the carving and smoothing shaping of the bottom and top side now, and what I've done is I've taken our template, our top template, and you got to fudge a little bit because now you've got shapes in here and stuff, and that's why I like to remark all your centers. So I remarked this center, and you can see I marked that side and that side. So when I reline these up, I can take, you can see the center there and center here. So I can just line it up here, line it up there, and you got to, like I said, fudge it a little bit, but you get your center line again, and you get this centered. And so you have the bottom marked, and so now we can actually start cutting in the sides, the curvature of the sides. So basically it's just you know, shaping and remark, just keeping your centers revamped every time they're removed. So just a quickie there. So here we go. Hey guys, part 2 video 4. All right, I did my little saw thing, bastard file thing, and sanding thing. So now you can see we've got our curve and a curve there, and so we have our side and we have our bottom. So now we have our basic shape here, compared to the other one I started, which is a lot more difficult, but as you can see, it end up being a lot less work if I do it this way. So again, it's a little less complicated. So there's the old one, and there's the new one. So now I'm doing a lot of finishing, and you guys might have figured out that the bottom of this tank is going to be hollow. So why do I want it all nice and smooth and flat? Well, it just makes things easier as you go through all the processes. So it's a little bit extra time finishing, but it's worthwhile in the end because you get a more accurate representation of everything that way. So there we go with part 2 of this, and next we going to get into a little bit of detailing. So there you go, guys. Hey guys, video 6, reboot tank plug build. All right. What we're doing now is we're starting our shaping. Now this is gets a little bit kind of confusing if you haven't done this before. We have our side. Now there's a taper, because that's the flat part that this is a flat, actually flat top, and then it angles down to this side, which is flat here. So basically the angle looking from the side is all entailed in this little area here. So what you have to do here is actually follow that with pretty much with the line, and you can see back here there's a little bit of a taper, or it gets really skinny towards the back and towards the front. So you just kind of have to play that by ear and kind of fudge it in. So I know it's kind of hard to explain, so I'll just have to do it. Basically, this is just going to be angled down to the flat side here. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'll do one side, then you can kind of see what I'm talking about there, because it's kind of complicated to describe. Okay, see you. All right, just finished step one here, or maybe step two. Now, what I did basically is, this is the width, this is the top, this is flat basically. Well, it's going to have a little bit of curve, but it's basically, this is the width of the top. This part is going to be the angle down to the side. And just to make it easy, I just did it straight all the way across. And I've just done the top, but I make this at a right angle. This is straight down, this is straight across. This preserves the side of the tank, so up on top. So that's just, so it's basically a right angle here. And just show you this first step here. So we'll just do the top, kind of give you an idea what's going on here. And that's the first step there. Step two, one or two, I don't know. What I've done here is, the step before I made a right angle, so I'd have, keep the shape of the side. And now what I've done is I've taken the bastard file. I'm leaving the corners, those have to kind of be fudged in, but I'm taking the bastard file and I'm taking from the bottom of the tank, the bottom line, and I'm pretty much, it's kind of hard to tell, I'm pretty much running right up to this line here, making everything flat or close to flat, because this keeps the bottom of the width of the tank like we need it, and this also keeps our tank line there. So that's just that, and I'll get to the other process so it starts making a little bit more sense there. Cool. And the next step, I forgot what number it was, but so what we've done, we've preserved our line here. We've cut this back, and now what I've done with this angle here is I actually cut an angle in this, right here along this edge. So like I said, I have to fudge a little bit to get that right and that right. But now what we have is the top and our side, and you can see this angle here, so that's how it's going to show up. Now everything's going to be rounded, but right now we're getting everything lined up and all angles correct. And so so it's basically, you have your flat side here the way this tank is, and you've got your angle here, and then you've got your top. So this side's come along really nicely. So there you go on this one. All right, next section here. This is where you get some of the creativity here and kind of fudging stuff. Now, we've got this angle down. We know the top width here. We've got our angle down as we're working on. Now I'm working on this step in the tank. Now, this is kind of where you kind of have to guesstimate what you want and what you like. So I'm just kind of guesstimating on the depth here. I've got my side view, and so this was the low part of the tank. This is the part where it goes from low to high, and this is the high part of the tank. So basically I just cut the stencil up, and you just have to kind of locate it close. Everything again moves around where you're at. So I located off the bottom because that's where the least work done was, on the foam. So I located off that, marked it up. So you've got your low, your high, and your step. And So now I'm just kind of basically getting this all side smooth. I've got my step done, and what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to mark it with my magic marker here, so I know where this inner curve is, and then I'm going to make this angular step up there, and that way I do one side at a time, and so I can actually either make templates or just kind of guesstimate to match the other side to the same thing. So that's the next step here. And the next step in this video 5, I hope, I can't remember right now, but as you can see, I've just hand sanded. I use regular sandpaper or the block, and what I've done is I've had this step I marked in, so now I just hand sanded it down. So now you have your 2-step here, and so that's basically what the side's going to look like with a step there. And so I need to do the other side. And like I said, I do one side at a time, so I can kind of take measurements and match it on the other side. Now this is basically a base. This is not going to be what I lay the fiberglass on, so it doesn't have to be exactly perfect, because you'll be able to play with a layer I'm going to put on the outside of this. So this is just your base, so you want to get as close as you can. It doesn't have to be super exact, but you want it pretty darn close to what you want. And like I said, a lot of these it's going to be smoothed over some, so there's not these sharp edges, so it doesn't look so inorganic. But that's it for that side. I still have to do the curvature on the bottom. I won't do that until I get the other side done. So and that's it for this session. See ya, guys. Okay, guys, I think this is video 6. If not, I'll correct it in the final format there. Now, this is where things get a little funky. Last video I showed you how I set up this step and cut it in. Now it's time to do this side. Now when you start getting angles in here and tapers and all that kind of fun stuff, it's really hard to go by the templates anymore. You just kind of have to use them as guides. And basically what happens is you really just have to start measuring from the top across, and then from the front, and just to kind of get everything as close as you can, because everything is really off from the templates here. So so I've measured everything. I've set up my template guidelines here, and so now I'm back to the sandpaper and file to get this side finished up. So there you go, guys. Okay, I thought I'd try to show you the little actual action here. I don't know if I can do it with one hand, but I'll give it a shot. Like I said, I've got my template here, and I'm just taking the bastard file, and as you can see, I'm just being careful here, and I'm just using it to take all this down. And I've got my little caliper here, and I'm going to use this to match this depth on this side also. And once I get this cut down, then I'll go ahead and use the sandpaper to smooth it out. But as you can see, that smooths it out really nicely. But that's kind of what it is. It's a big mess, but that's kind of part of it all. But as you can see, if you're just careful, you can actually tear a lot of material off really quick with these files. So just a little illustration there. So back to your regular programming. And after making some more styrofoam snow and a mess, we've got our 2 sides. So that's there, and that's there. So we're pretty darn close to each other. So that's pretty much for this part here. This is kind of the hard part, one of them. So kind of have to be creative and artistic a little bit and fudge a little bit here and there and just kind of go by eye and by feel. So that's it for this video 6, I think. So there you go, guys. Well, guys, we're getting close to doing something different. This is such a complex design. It just takes a lot of time to design and carve up and stuff, but we're getting close to doing our next step here. Basically what I'm doing now is all my edges here I'm going to be outlining. I outline, and then what I'll have to do is I'll have to measure this side, measure the other side, and kind of fudge a little bit to make sure all of these are the same widths on both sides, so they both sides match up as close as they can. If we look down here, I kind of had I was able to keep, it's hard to see with the sun right now, but I could keep this bottom line here on this part, and then the back I just kind of had fudge on this bottom line just because of all the curvature here. But this is the outline of our template, so it basically goes there, and you can see where it pretty much matches. Now what this is all the edges that are not flat. This bottom edge here basically is a part of the tank that curves down and underneath, so it's actually not on the side of the tank, so kind of have to fudge that in, come around and do some blending. But that's gonna basically fold curve under for the actual shape of the tank. And that's about it for now. I'm just going to do a little bit of shaping on this underside, and hopefully we'll be pretty close to doing something different than just sanding and carving and stuff. So there we go for that part. And that only took a few minutes, but you can hopefully see without the shading here. I've added some angle here. The Stinger tank had an angle here. In the back it was a little bit more rounded, so that's what I've done. And you can kind of see I just kind of match the width of these angles here, and she's kind of rounded on the back there. So now we're pretty close to being able to go to some more steps that are different. So that's about it for the carving, except like I said, some touch up here to make sure all these little parts are the same measurement on both sides. But that's about it, guys. Okay, guys, back to a new repetitive step. How fun. All right, now it's a little bit different, but still repetitive. Now what you need to do is go down to your local grocery store or whatever and get a whole bunch. I usually get 2 or 3 of these guys. And the party toothpicks out of wood, colored. All right, and then what I'll do is I'll take them out, and I'll basically just cut them in half with side cutters. Cut them all in half so you have a bunch. So you'll just have a pile of halfies here. Now, to get ready for the coating, we want the coating to be consistent all the way over everywhere, and you want to know where you keep all your lines and angles. So basically, it's pretty simple. Let it refocus or whatever. I've started here. But just take these halfies. Now, wherever you have a line, you want it to be a line, you know, straight up and down with that line. So I'll just go ahead, and I've already pushed a few in like this. Now, I'd made this out of plexiglass, just a little baby chunk of plexiglass, and it's pretty. I don't know why this won't focus. It's too close, I guess. And I just drilled a hole 3 millimeters deep in this end. I usually, not an inch, and the other end with a hole. Cool. I do this, I paint it a bright color because when they're clear and you put them down, it will disappear. So basically, just a 3 millimeter hole. Now you can kind of see, I tapered it down. I have a long edge here and one edge that's just basically as big as a hole. And that's just, so when you get into these depth areas, you can get the correct depth on this, because this is basically just a depth gauge. And what you do is I like to pre-push them in, and then I'll just take this guy and finish the job there, and just do that. Finish the job there. Just push it in, push it in. Not a big deal. I like to, so now you have your lines basically set up for your coating we're going to put on, which is going to be ta-da, plaster of Paris. And there's a reason for that. And so, but this just kind of gives you an idea what the next step is. You're going to take these guys, and you don't have to run them this close. I like to run them kind of closer towards the corners or curves like that, so you can follow it when you start sanding the plaster. But see, this line is from the top. This line would come in from the side. This would come in from the side. That would come in from the side. This one would come in from this angle because that's perpendicular basically. So you try to keep perpendicular. And like on edges like this, that's why I have it so skinny on the side, so you can push these in and not catch it anywhere except where it's flat, so your depth is right. So that's basically the next step. There's a couple more things I'll be doing, but so if you're doing a project like this, go ahead and get your colored wooden toothpicks and cut them all in half and make your little tool. And so that'll be ready for when you get to that point. And that's about it, guys, for this section. See you guys. Finally getting back to my tank build. It's a little windy today, but I have to be outside for this stuff. And so I'm back here again. So if you've gone through all my other videos, I'm going to put them all together in the end, so it's all one big kind of deal. But here we are here. I've got my foam block master here. I've got all my colored toothpicks set up at the same height everywhere, so when I start sanding the plaster layer, then I'm going to know exactly how thick, so I can keep this whole thing correct. So this part's actually pretty simple, nothing major to it. You can't do this all at once, but I just do it in pieces. Okay, Mr. Ants, you're not going to like what I'm doing. But I've got my paintbrush. I cut a little bit short so I'll pick up the plaster, and I've got my squeegee here also. So let's just go ahead and water this stuff up. Don't breathe this stuff. And let's see where we're at here. Okay. I always add too much water. Okay, that's still just a little on the thin side. It's flowing a little too much. So let's stick it up just a little bit more, hopefully. By George, I think that's going to do it. And again, the reason I use plaster, it takes longer to work, obviously, because you have to put on layers and it doesn't dry real quick. But a lot of guys want to use Bondo, and that just sands so hard. Plaster just sands so easy. And so you just start spreading it on. And you don't want to push the toothpicks in, so you don't want to rack it too hard. we're just about to a point of no return here. Like icing a cake, I guess, kind of, sort of. Just get as close as you can. And, oops, get out of there. And it up. So that's kind of what that is. Pretty simple stuff. And just make sure you clean everything up for the next round. But that's the first step of the plastering. So we'll get that finished up and then do something else. Or start doing. Hey guys, we're up to our next step almost here. Now from our last video, number 9, we started doing the first layer of plaster in sections. As you can see, it kind of gets funky looking. The coloring from the toothpicks soaks through, so isn't that pretty? But I did this in 4 sections. I did the tops and the sides in 1, and then in 2, and then I did the bottoms in 1 on each side also. So that was 4, and it really didn't take a lot of time to do, but you just have to wait in between to let the last one set up, last set set up. Now I'm getting to the point now. The second layer, which will usually be the last layer except for any touch-up, I'm going to be using, I don't know where it went, my other stuff, the plastic spreader, the Bondo spreader. Because now we've got just some places where the toothpicks are standing proud, so we want to get those covered. So I use a spreader, and what I do there is I just basically spread here. I'll probably show you a video, it's not a big deal. Just spread out on top, so that way all of the toothpicks are covered, and then we can start sanding this. Now, one thing you have to do is, I've got a little sprayer here, but you can use a big sprayer, works a little bit better. I just don't know where mine is. But when you put plaster over plaster, the new plaster will dry too quick because the old plaster actually sucks all the moisture out of the new plaster. So before adding your next layer of plaster to anything, make sure if it's going to connect to any old plaster, is you just basically just spray it and saturate. I don't know if you can tell here, but it's it almost immediately just soaks into the old plaster because it's so porous. So I'm going to be doing this side with the squeegee here, and but yeah, I don't think you can see it, but as soon as you can see it's wet, and then it just soaks, basically soaks in. So you just want to saturate this stuff so the last squeegee layer is doesn't dry out too fast and crack on you. So that's basically just that. For you just wet it down until it's good and saturated, and then you can start laying your layer, last layer of cleanup plaster there. So there's that. Okay guys, we're back to mixing plaster. So basically I'm going to do the top and the side. You might be able to see it's all, I've saturated everything to where it pretty much stays wet, so I know the plaster's full of water, so it's not going to mess up the upper layer, the next layer we put on. So let's see. You can kind of see that. That's not a big deal, but again, that's just going to be mixing plaster. Okay, hopefully that should be enough because it's pretty close. Because these are just barely standing proud here. Now the hardest part for me is not putting in too much water. So let's see if we can get that without a mess. Now this you want to mix just a little bit thicker than normal because it's actually going on saturated plaster. Now it's almost just like laying Bondo. The top's not too bad. Looks like pretty much all the toothpicks were buried. This plaster sands so quickly and easily. It's not a big deal to put on too much. It sands right off. Basically, your toothpicks will set up the height for your final coat. Okay, had to mix up just a little bit more. As I said, this is just like a skim coat on Bondo. So it's just a little bit short. And so we'll just add our coat here. I know it looks horrific, but it sands down uber quick. Okay, so that quarter's done for now. So 3 more to go, which are exactly the same, so no recording on that. So that's number 10, I guess. Okay, guys, I've got my 2 layers on. This is just a quickie before I start the messy stuff. But you want to mark all your separators. If it's obvious, you don't have to mark it, but this is kind of top, that's the front. This is the outside of the bin there. Because you're going to be reinstalling all these at one point, so that's just right front, mid, whatever. So just mark each of your separation pieces so you know how they go back in the correct way. So there you go. Okay, guys, this must be part 11. Wow. This is where the mess starts. Now, I use a big box sometimes. Other times I'll use tarps. It depends on if it's windy or not. This is where it gets really messy. Use a mask because this stuff isn't really good to breathe in case it's blowing around. But now we're to the part. I'm going to do some finishing now. I use very coarse. This is 50. I think this is 60 right now. I haven't changed it up. To start our sanding, I also have this is just a wire brush that I've wrapped duct tape around. So this is for cleaning this off. Sometimes the sandpaper will fill up with plaster, so I just use this for cleaning. So, here we're going to start. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to grab something here first. Well, before I start sanding, I'll grab my bastard file for these really high edges to cut these guys down. And just for a little test here. Scoot here a little bit. Okay guys, I'm doing this in sections because it does take a lot of time. I've been trying to work out which would be the easiest way for most guys to do this kind of thing without well if you do it a lot then you know what you're doing. If you don't, then it gets kind of rough, and I'm just trying to figure out the best way to show you guys how to do this. Basically back. I did a lot of finishing on the top and the side yesterday, but when you're at this phase where you just have the raw plaster on here, grab yourself a bastard file, a rough bastard file, and then just carefully, you can see the blue dot from the toothpicks. You can see on the top where I've got hopefully where I can see the line of these guys. And basically, you just want to start filing this stuff down. Like I said, if you don't want to make a huge mess, get a big old tarp or a box or whatever. But this is just time consuming, but as you can see, any other medium, especially Bondo or whatever, is going to take a lot more time to actually work down. Once you start seeing the toothpicks, just be careful and stay off of those and go someplace else. When you're doing your your rough cut, always take a few pictures too, so you can go back and kind of visualize where all these guys are anyway, besides your blue dots from the die. But that's basic. I mean, not much else to show you there, but just do your rough cut, and then you can get down to your block sanding, and that's about it for that. So don't need a lot of video. I'll just show you progress here and there. Hey guys, shoot, this is 11 or 12, probably 12. She's starting to look like a tank now. As you can see, like with laying Bondo, you'll have high spots and low spots. Obviously sand off the high spots. I got a little crazy with the plaster, so I had a few extra hours of filing and sanding because I just wasn't real careful applying the plaster. So took a little more time to get back down to this place, but as you can see, you've got some low spots here, and then inevitably always seems to be at some point you break through to the foam. I know that's hard to see, but that's some foam sticking through there, and I missed pretty good here. far as that goes. So I cut into the foam there. And there on this side, I think I probably mismeasured a little bit there. But when I was matching everything up, it went through. So basically, again, this is like doing Bondo. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wet the plaster, saturate it, and then it's just like putting on Bondo skim coats and stuff. I'm going to fill all this up. As far as the foam goes, we got to make sure it's not too thin any place. So what I like to do is I'll just lightly tap, and you can see that's just too thin there. So it's a little extra work, but not a big deal. Like I said, I just didn't measure as accurate as I wanted to. So this all got thin. Now as far as fixing this, it's not a big deal, really. Just give it a good little scrape. Tear out some of that foam so it'll fill in and be thicker. And usually it's not this bad, but I missed pretty good on this side. It was just too long. So that's there, but not a lot there. Just make it so you've got a nice little indent. So when you put the plaster in, it'll be thick. So that's basically it for that. As you can see, like I said, I've got a lot of handwork into it. And you can also see probably not all of the toothpicks are sticking out. One thing, you got to be a little bit artistic too. And while you're sanding it, you actually have to feel it. There's going to be slightly high spots and low spots because it's hard to get the foam exactly flat. So just find your high spots where your toothpicks are at, and then just kind of work them there. Sometimes you don't get all the way through to the toothpicks, and sometimes, most of the time, you do. So, but this is pretty simple here. Basically, just filling in low spots and fixing thin spots, and so that's it for that. Hey guys, it's been raining on and off today, so I'm inside the garage right now. I just wanted to show you a quickie finish up. Just like I said earlier, just like Bondo, you'll have high and low spots. And so basically what I've done is a skim coat. Again, I saturated the plaster so it didn't suck out all the water from the new stuff. And where I had to dig out the foam because the plaster was too thin. I've already filled those guys in. Now you can probably see the skim coat and the repair. It looks pinkish or red. What I do is, so when I'm getting to these final coats here, I just use regular food coloring dye, whatever color you want to use. And that way I can know when I've sanded through and I'm down to the base again. So that's just kind of for eyeballing. I'm going to be sanding here with going back to a finer sand paper because we don't want to be pulling a lot of material off anymore because it's already down to your points here. So basically add a little color there. You can skim coat and fill up all your little problem areas, and that's about it for that. But as you can see, we got a lot of cleanup I had to do on this, so measure carefully the first time. Okay guys, making a little bit of progress here. Always fun and dirty. What we have here now is we're starting to get our final shape. Now on the top of the tank, or on any tank, if you're going to have a flat surface, something like this, what you need is basically make yourself a sanding tool that's wider than the surface you want to sand. I just found this piece of aluminum which is flat. You can just find anything that's basically flat and wrap your sandpaper on it. As you can see some dark areas there, and up front here where it's not exactly even yet. Now I'm going to show you why there's dark area there. What you're going to need for this process is just color lacquer. This is semi-gloss. It doesn't really matter. I like semi-gloss or whatever, but you want lacquer because it doesn't gum up your sandpaper, and it dries really quick. I get a couple of different colors because they're basically reveal coats, and so I'll do a little bit more here and show you exactly how that works. It's almost exactly the same way as you're finishing metal bondo or metal body work. So be back in just a second here. Okay, I'm back. Now basically what a reveal coat is trying to find your low spots. And so what you do is you take your lacquer and just do a fine spray coat. We're not trying to paint anything really or coat. We're just for revealing what we're doing here to see where the high places and low places are. So now I've gone to a lot finer paper here. I'm not sure what grit, might be 220. And so basically what I'm doing is just doing here, and just lightly sanding. I mean, this is nothing, kind of like watching paint dry here, really. But as you can see, you don't want to be pulling too much material off if you have to. Like I said, the plaster sands really quickly, so just go slow and easy. And your reveal coat will show you where your high and low spots are, and so that's basically what that is. Now another thing, and you can see here again where I've got some low spots here, and I don't know if you can really see. You can see some things here. Now there's a few places where I have I don't know, small indents. Now those don't have to be filled with plaster. We can actually do that with filler putty, and we'll do that in a few steps here. But so if you have any small areas that are a little bit funky pits or whatever, those will be fine. You can fix those later. As I said here, you just want to go slowly and do both sides. You can actually do a visual on them, make sure both sides are look pretty close to the same. Handmade stuff is never exact on all sides, and that's what's kind of cool about handmade stuff. But so there you go on that part, and when we get to something else, I'll go to that. So, all right, just a quickie. I think this is number 13, maybe. Okay, guys. Basically, not much to say here. I found the low spots. Haven't done this stuff yet because we're not to that. But I found the low spots, did a few little repairs, and I used compressed air to blow all the stuff out of the nooks and crannies. So now what we're going to do is pretty simple. We're just going to give a good coat of lacquer paint, so now we can start finding the detail stuff. Okay, guys, depends on the size of the part you're making. On a tank, I'll usually, for the first coat, I'll blow a whole can of lacquer on it, and just super soak everything. Basically what we're doing here is filling in a lot of scratches and cracks and crevices and things like that. So still looks pretty nasty, but this is setting up a base, so now we can use just regular lacquer putty to fill in all the bad spots, and we'll be able to start matching the sides on each angle here. So I'm going to do that, but whole can of black on this, lacquer black, and again I'm going to do just a very fine, just a coat of silver on the top, and that again is going to show us any low spots that needs to be fixed. So that's about it for this this one. Making some progress here. I just want to let you know, see how nasty this looks, but it's going to come out really nice. So there we go. And here's just a super light coat of lacquer silver, and see on top, but it's just a flash coat, just like, we're not even trying to put a real coat on there. You can see the black through there. This is just a reveal coat, and you can see how nasty this looks. But we're making progress actually, so we're looking good. Okay guys, back to looking like hell. Starting our wet sanding now. I'm doing 150, but as I said, we've got a reveal coat here. We can see where we actually went to the plaster, and some high spots. A lot of stuff you just can't see till you start wet sanding with finer stuff, but you can see the pure silver there, and the pure silver there, and a little bit up here. Those are the low spots. And there's one part a little bit here, and right there there's a big low spot there. So it's looking like hell right now, but she's actually getting smoother, so that's the best part. So next is going to be lacquer putty, looks like. Start filling in some of these holes and stuff, but that's our first 150 wet sand. So you go forward, you go back, but we're making progress actually. Back at it, guys. Basically got most of the glaring pock marks and things filled in with lacquer putty, and but as you can see, it's hard to tell what everything is exactly. So everything goes in steps. You have to do a check and a paint and a sand and a check and a paint and a fill. So basically this is the start of that, and so once I let all this stuff dry, we'll get to the next step. Okay guys, continuation of the last video. As you can see, the really crappy parts I've already done with lacquer putty, and this is where some guys kind of get off track. Now, a guy showed me how to do body work a million years ago. What they'll try to do in this stage is sand down everything even, all the lacquer things are down even. Now, as you can see, something like that, you really can't eyeball anything. So basically what I'll do now is I'm going to shoot more black over the top of this, and that way we can get an eyeball on any undulations there or any other problems. There's always little places you just can't see when they're all sanded like this. So basically what I'm going to do now is just put another coat of black. Okay guys, here we go again. We've got our coat of black again. Now we're going now we reverse stuff. With the black, now we can see some of the deeper imperfections here and here that you just don't always catch when it's 15 different colors or whatever. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to, you can see lacquer putty here. What I'm going to do now is basically lacquer putty this whole thing and fill any divots in there are. And got my coat of lacquer putty. So she's looking like hell again. back and forth, as I say, but another step done. Hey guys, back just for a short video. Been doing some other stuff, this and that. I've done a few paint and repeats here. One thing, and you'll find with a lot of fiberglass body parts like tanks and things like that, you won't find a lot of angles, a lot of corners, a lot of this stuff, because it's just so difficult to match on both sides and get everything straight. So a lot of them will just be kind of bulbous and round, and so you hide a lot of this stuff. But I wanted this specific tank shape, so it's a lot of extra work. And so as you can see here, what I'm doing now is I'm using the silver over the black, because I've got to get all these lines straight and even on both sides, and here also. And so basically what you have to do is you have to just use your two colors, and then you have to sand and shoot, sand and shoot. So if you decide to build a tank or tailpiece, keep it as simple as possible, or it's going to be a lot of extra work. So that's where we are now. We're getting really close, actually, to getting this thing finished. Okay guys, we're going to do our next step. Now I've got, basically I sanded and filled with paint back and forth until I got all my lines straight and as matching as possible on both sides. Now you'll notice I've got, hopefully you can notice, you can see some where my toothpicks are sticking out here, or just a little bit high. Some scratches, got little pieces here, this and that. Now you're going to drive yourself crazy. Here's a little couple holes right there. Now it's going to drive you crazy if you try to keep filling those in and sanding and filling and sanding. And this is where a lot of guys make a mistake. They try to do too much with the sanding and stuff. What I was taught years ago, let the paint do a lot of the work for you. Now I'm using, again, two colors. Just happen to have duplicolor. They've got a primer and filler. The filler just has a lot of solids in it. So that's going on next. Now this is going to help fill in everything here. Again, I have two colors. I use a light color underneath, and then I'll use a darker color on top. So when you can see, you can actually see things more with a darker color. So I'll put that over the lighter color, and as I sand, I can see anything that's showing up. So that's going to be our next step. And like I said, you can drive yourself crazy trying to get all this other stuff fixed up without letting the actual paint do the work for you there. So hey guys, I don't know if this would be 17 or 18. It really doesn't matter. The tank, it looks like we'll probably have maybe 2 more sanding sessions. We'll clean up a little bit here and there, but she's looking really pretty. I don't know if you can see the gloss off of that, but as far as primer goes, she's looking really sharp. Almost there, ready to mold. And but we're not to that yet. What I have here is we actually have to do the inside of the tank, the cutout, so it'll actually fit on a frame. Actually, I'm making this so it will fit on the T500 frame and all Kawasaki frames too, because it's just a cool tank, and so I want to make it to fit, obviously, as many frames as you can. Now what I do is probably a little different from other guys, but this is just how I learned how to do it, and I do it. It always works best if you have a semi-bare frame. This has nothing on it, but it's best to actually do it with everything that's going to be mounted, coils, horn, whatever, anything that's going to be underneath the tank here mounted. Then what you basically do, or I do, is I'll just take cheap aluminum foil or any kind of aluminum foil you want, and I wrap it all over the wherever the tank's going to be. One of the big things that's always good to do, I'm not doing it here because I've done this a few times, is tape cardboard on all the areas where it's going to be important for clearance on the tank, just so you have that little bit of leeway for the tank to be able to move around. So don't mind the noises. So the cats are loving this plastic tarp here, having a blast. But so I just take aluminum, lay it over the top. The reason for it would be obvious in a second, but leave everything on if you can. Now the Suzuki has these tank tins. I don't know if I'll have the clearance to leave those. If not, they'll have to be cut off or removed. Usually when somebody does a cafe setup, they're never going to go back to stock, so removing, you know, bits and pieces of the frame is usually what happens if you're going to really build a cafe. So what I have to do here now basically is get the tank to fit on the frame. And what I usually start out, pretty simple, is just my half round bastard file. And so it's quite obvious I need to open up the section where the top of the frame tube comes through. I'm not sure if I can sit on that or not, but that's relatively simple. Hopefully, let's see, can you see right in there? Yeah, I think we can see it here. It's relatively simple. Carefully, that's why I have this big tarp, because it makes a mess because it's styrofoam. But can't see that. We're going to make a big old mess here. And as you can see with the styrofoam, start eating away with it. Cuts really, really fast. Now you might be thinking, why do I have an area open this big for a tube that's basically going to be that big? Well, we don't want to forget that we have to have cables going through there, wiring harness, whatever else. So I like to keep this as wide as possible, as much as a stock tank, just so we definitely have clearance to get all the wires and things through there. So kind of boring to watch me do this, but I just wanted to show you what comes next before I totally finish the plug for making the mold. So put this stuff up here for now, and that'll be it for that section. So there you go, guys. The next step. Back again, guys. Making a huge mess. Actually, if you don't want your neighbors to get mad and the place to look like it's been snow and styrofoam, because it does go all over the place, I came up with this trick real easy. Is I just use some of the metal grating there. You can use chicken wire or whatever to make a little space here. That way when you vacuum, it doesn't pull up the tarp into it and block it off. So this way you can vacuum it up. I suggest you do it every once in a while so it doesn't get packed up really bad. As you can see, it goes all over the place. Makes a pretty big mess. But now to this part, grab yourself, the reason I have aluminum foil here is grab yourself some, probably have a can of junk extra paint or whatever. It needs to be cheapy paint that that doesn't dry too quick, because when you're cutting out for the inside of your tank, if you just go crazy, cut everything out, you'll lose a lot of your capacity. So what I do is when I'm getting close, as you can see, I'm starting to cut this all out. As I set it down, it's setting high, but I don't know exactly where it's hitting. So instead of just cutting everything else really bad, I just take some cheapy paint, and while it's wet, I just set the tank down, wibble it a little bit, pull it up, and you can see right there where it's hitting. So now I'll take a little more off and refit, and then I just go step by step like that, and that way you don't get paint all over everything, and you know exactly where to remove the foam. So that's a couple other little tricks I do when building a tank. So there you go. Okay guys, this is where I'm at now. I've got the Suzuki frame done pretty much. Now I'm working on the KH400 frame. As you can see, don't go in the house. You get in all sorts of trouble. So, so far I still need to do the 500 frames and the 750s. But as you can see, I think, can you see what I've had to remove there so far? Get down here. So far, and I actually had to, sometime form comes over function, and just the way the curvature is on this thing, I actually had to cut this way back here to fit the Suzuki frame where I wanted it to. So now I'm going to have to clean that up and meld that all together. And so as you can see, if I just gutted everything out, we'd lose a ton of fuel capacity. It's not going to be a big, huge capacity anyway, just because of the design, but a lot of guys don't go touring on cafe bikes. So we should be good here. So that's about it for now, guys.
It's video 19, I believe, of the reboot tank plug build. It's cold outside, snowed yesterday, so I'll be doing some of this stuff inside that I can do before I get to the stinky fiberglass stuff, which is going to be here soon. But shop's cold, so I'm inside for now. But what we have here is, on the last video you saw how I was relieving the inside of the tank to fit the various frames I wanted it to fit. And so once I did that, and I cut it, like I said, cut in a little extra clearance. You don't want tight against everything, because there's always, you always need a little bit of stuff for movement. And then after I did all the clearancing and relieving and stuff, I actually didn't have to do it, but I did. I took some probably 220, and you can actually sand the styrofoam pretty smooth. And once I did that, I started taping. This is painter's tape, so it's not real sticky. And so I just very carefully taped everything on the bottom side here, getting it ready for the base mold. So just make sure everything's nice and tight, and no big bubbles or anything, because that'll cause trouble. And what I did on this very outer layer, I used cheap aluminum. You can use foil, you can use expensive stuff, whatever. This is good for painting also, because it kind of, you can shape it to sticks. So that's a little secret somebody told me about that. When you're taping off for painting, use cheap aluminum foil. And I did the complete tank here, because when using resin, fiberglass resin, it will get in every nook and cranny you possibly can, no matter what you try to do. So I will literally tape up everything so it doesn't get in it. So at this point, whenever I'm working on it, again, it's just plaster covered with paint, so I'll always have a cushion I'm working on. Now once I got everything taped down and really nice and covered up, next I would need to make my patterns for my molds. And so I take just regular rolled construction paper they use for actual home construction, and it's cheap, and you get a nice big roll of stuff, really cheap. And then I start cutting my patterns. Now this one This particular tank is almost an exact copy on each side of each other, so I can actually double up on the on one of the patterns. I do the patterns just to make it a lot easier to build the part, actually. So what I will do is I will always overlap what I actually want as far as the part goes, and so and I just start cutting and fitting for the different pieces. It really doesn't matter how many you make. You want whatever's comfortable. On parts like this where you've got an indent going on here, you have your overlap. I'll split it so I can make sure it lays flat, and then I've got that. I'll need I do 3 of those. This one here I'll have 3 for 3 layers, and you can see where I say tear. I'll tear the fiberglass mat. I'll get to that in just a second, but that's so it will lay flat. So it's kind of like wrapping a present, that if you need something to lay flat, sometimes you have to split the paper. So this will go down the center. That's the back, and then we have the side here. Again, I usually put on how many copies I need and how many total pieces it is to the pattern. So there's 3 of them. So this is 1 of 3. This one, again, you're overlapping. Again, I always make it larger. You can see where I've got tear here, and tear there. So once you're laying your fiberglass, it comes down and it can fold, and then this way it'll actually lay flat. Now, opposed to a lot of other guys, I know they make molds, this and that, whatever. I use fiberglass mat. A lot of guys like to use the cloth, which is fine, but cloth is very flexible, and you either have to have a whole bunch of layers of it, or a few really thick layers, and it's still relatively bendable, flexible. I really don't like that personally, and so I use mat because you can make. I'm only going to need 3 layers of mat to make a nice stiff mold that still has a little flexibility so you can get parts off. So I also use, well, I actually use mat. Now, a lot of guys use the expensive epoxies to make their molds also. You cannot use fiberglass mat with epoxies, because the matting is actually held together with some kind of glue or whatever you want to call it, that only the just standard poly resin will melt. Actually, if you try to use epoxy with mat, it will not separate or bend or anything. It will just get wet, and it just doesn't work well. So I just cheapy Bondo poly resin is all I use, and so that's pretty simple. Also, I like to cut a few extra strips of fiberglass here and there, because sometimes when you finally get to a point and you'll have a strip, there might be an opening there, and so you just put in a little strip of the fiberglass mat. So I'll cut a few extra little strips there. I try to use multiple pieces also, because when you have them, you'll have overlaps here, here, and here. That also strengthens the mold. So I try not to do it in one piece. I try to do it in a few pieces, so that way you've got some extra strength there. And that's basically it for this part of it. What I'm going to do next is I've got a special spray separator I use, and that's for the next part of it all. But right now everything's prepped up to be making the base mold here. So we've got that. We've got our stuff cut here, and now I just have to cut the fiberglass mat, and after I get this all sprayed with a separator. So that's about it, guys, for number 19, I guess. Hey guys, getting ready. I guess this is step 20 already. How exciting.
Okay, we're getting to the nitty-gritty of all this stuff before we actually start laying fiberglass. A few things I want to say first before I start spraying, because that's actually pretty boring. But I just want to show you a little bit of how I do that. But when the compressor kicks in, it's just way too loud to hear anything. So I'm going to do this first. Now, I was talking in video 19, I was talking about separator. From Aircraft Spruce, I get a lot of my parts and stuff. They sell, it's called Plastilese 512B. It says for use with polyester resin. It'll also work with the epoxies also. This is a little bit expensive. You can look at a few places. Now I get mine from Associated Composites, I believe. They call theirs, or whatever their brand they use is called Pardal Coverall Finish. Now, I don't want to go through whatever. It's basically just a solvent-resistant spray-on separator. And what I'm going to be doing is you're going to have to spray a few coats on this to get a coating on it, obviously. And that way the resin will not, the fiberglass resin will not get into the styrofoam and eat it, or actually stick to anything here. Now this stuff there, I used to get the stuff that was alcohol based because it evaporated and dried faster, but I can't seem to find that anymore. So almost all of this now is water based. So there's got to be some reason for that. Now, depending on the temperature, sometimes when you're using this stuff and it's really warm, you'll start shooting it and you'll start getting spiderwebby stuff. So basically, you just have to add a little water to your mix. It doesn't take a whole lot to your mix, just to thin it out, and that'll stop the spiderwebs. Now it's pretty cool in here, so I don't think I'll have that problem. And so that's basically that for most everything. I've got my little Harbor Freight gravity feed sprayer. My compressor's back there. I also have my heat gun. Depending on your temperature, sometimes you have to use that to dry between coats. Now, one thing, there's like 3 different ways of doing this. On something like this, it's not a big deal, but when you're doing finishing of the mold, as on the top side, I'll get a little bit more into that. But there's a few ways of doing it. There's a specialized wax. A lot of guys like to wax their mold to separate the parts. Others like to wax and then use a Pardal or separator on top of that. Or you can just use a separator. I've tried them both. The wax just takes forever to do. You have to do 1,000 coats, it seems like, over and over and over again. When all I've really ever found is to use the separating agent, which I've never had a part stick, so that's what I use. So that's about it. If you're going to use a heat gun, be very careful not to get anything too hot. I also have somewhere here is my temperature gun, which it was here, so it's around here somewhere. I'll have to find it. But so that's basically it for this. I'm just going to do a little bit of video of me shooting it. Now, when you shoot this stuff, if you're shooting it over wax, it'll probably fisheye a little bit, so you have to shoot really thin coats, let it dry and go. And it just depends on whatever the surface you're spraying on. So always start first with just very light coats and let it dry. It might be a little bit coarse, but that's not a big deal, because once you get your thicker coats on it, it's all going to smooth out. So basically that's it. Next I'll just get everything set up and prepped and kind of show you how I do the coating, and that should be it for this video at least. So we'll just cut this for now and we'll be back in a minute. Okay, I'm ready to go, guys. Don't forget your masks. So as I said, you have to start out with a few mist coats and let it dry, because on a lot of things they'll fisheye and they'll kind of mess up your surface. So you just want a real light misting. As I said, it won't be really flat. It'll be a little bit coarse, but your later coats, where you make it a little bit thicker, you spray it on thicker, and that will even it out and give you a smooth surface. But this is just kind of give you an idea. I don't know if you can see that coming out, but just very light coats. And not much else to see really. I'm just going to let this dry a little bit and put on a few coats and then prop up the mixture so it's shooting a little thicker. And that's going to be it for prepping the bottom for the building the bottom of the tank mold. So that's about it, guys. Take it easy. Hey guys, getting ready to start laying fiberglass. Now I know it kind of looks messy, it always is, but just like any other job, especially jobs where you've got a time frame going on, make sure you've got everything handy so you're not having to look for stuff while things are trying to keep from drying, this and that, or you're sticky from this stuff or whatever. So make sure you have all your necessities as far as doing the job. As far as this goes, with resins and stuff, you want your rolls of paper towel, you want a bunch of your gloves at hand. Polyester resin is pretty yuck, stinky, nasty stuff, so always have a good quality painter's mask filter. Regular stuff won't do with the fumes. I've got my stacks of separated out of fiberglass. I've got this here ready to start glassing. So basically have your mixing cups ready, stir sticks, you want to have your acetones ready, plenty of whatever resin you're going to be using, your hardener, things like that, brushes. I'm cheap, I reuse brushes, but on something like this I will take little cheapy brushes and I'll cut them short because if they're the brushes bristles are long, then they won't pack down in the fiberglass very well. So what you want to do there is I just cut these short so you got some stiff push going on there. And so that's about it. Just make sure you're prepped and have plenty of supplies ready to rock. And so I'll get set up here and show you. That's not real exciting laying fiberglass, but I'll do it anyway just so you can see. One other thing I only mix up maybe like 15-20 ounces of resin at a time. That way you're not fighting all the heat it will make up and then you'll lose a bunch of resin because it sets up. I only mix up maybe 15-20 ounces at a time. And as far as all that fun stuff goes, it's easier to mix more than it is trying to rush rush, laying down, set up resin and stuff. So I'll be back in just a minute, and I'll start laying some of this stuff. Like I said, it's not rocket scientist stuff, but let's get some of this stuff done. So I'll be back in a few. Okay, I'm back, guys. Everything's mixed up. Got my hardener mixed in, so here we go. Now one thing is on each piece, I don't lay all three pieces the same on top of each other because that leaves gaps. So I do one of each piece and then stack it that way.
you might be able to see, I do a little tear so everything will lay flat. I put a little tear in the middle of this back section also. See? As you can see, some of this is torn and some of it's cut, just depends on I'm going to have to mix some more, but that's basically it. That's just got to make sure everything's staying laid flat. And I mix the hardener in weak because it gives you more time. So it's all going to be a bunch of the same. So that's about it, guys.
Hey guys, as from the last installment photograph, you saw where the resin had gotten through the tape and eaten away some of the styrofoam, which made the thin plaster very weak, and actually most of the front broke out, which made a mess, so made a lot more work for me also. So as you can see, a lot of this section was needed repair. All this is underneath is now full of plaster, so it's a lot thicker now. But just a quickie before I show you how I repair the rest of this is, if you need to match something like this, I just take our construction paper again, and I will match it up with something. Luckily here there's a line, and I match it up, and then I just run my fingernail on it and a bunch of times, and that way it'll give you a line. A lot of guys have done this before for other things. They'll give you a line just to cut the paper on, and then you have something to line it up on this side, and then you do your mark. So that's how I'm going to do this, and that's just a little quickie. You can use like I said, use a paper to to match both sides if you have a problem like this on something like this. So there you go.
Hey guys, it's a repair day after a minor setback. Making the bottom plug mold. As you can see, a lot of damage here. The resin went through, ate away a lot of parts, ate away the foam underneath here. So when I pulled it apart, most of this broke out because there wasn't, it just didn't seal there well. So I filled this all up with plaster again for good backing, and I actually took the broken pieces and epoxied them in where I could find some, and then I just taped over it basically, and then I backfilled it with plaster and stuff. So it's a pretty big mess here still. What you might not be able to see is I'm going to get ready to fix this now, and so I actually took a little cutter, kind of got grooves in basically all around where there were cracks and things like that, and that way I'll give some bite to my repair stuff. Now the repair stuff I'm going to use here is really cool. I didn't find out about this until a few years ago. This is 3M Bondo. Oh, here comes the something or other. Stupid diesel truck. But I found this a few years ago. This is 3M. This is Bondo brand. This is called Professional Glazing and Spot Putty. Now, this is different than the red stuff, which is glazed putty also. This is I call this Bondo Light because it's real fine. Basically it's Bondo. It uses the same hardener as Bondo, but it dries really quick and sands really easy. So this is for repairs that are basically any deeper than just fine scratches and things like that. So it's perfect for this. The red stuff would take forever to dry, and being that thick it would crack, so that would not work for this. And using regular Bondo, it is so much harder to sand. It just causes a lot of problems. So this is a very fine sanding stuff. So try to find the 2-part. You can find them most automotive stores. If not, maybe your Napa or whatever. But what I'm going to do here now is basically just mix them up and go for it. Now, I like to mix up small patches because it does harden really quickly, and it only takes a minute amount of the hardener, or it'll harden way too quick. So I usually just add a little bit. I probably can't see it here, but just a little bit of hardener, just enough to give it. See, that's way too much hardener. So I'm just going to use a bit of it to give it a little bit of a pink, probably about that much. And like I said, this goes pretty quick. Actually, that's even more than I wanted, but give it a good, can't play around too much. There goes our Harley 3-wheeler neighborhood. So get that mixed up. And then basically you just, when it's deep like this, you're just going to squeegee in to fill in the deepness right now. And so I guess I could have mixed up some more, but what we're doing now is basically, it's going to take a few coats because it is kind of deep. So okay, so I'll mix some more up here. So that's basically how that goes. Don't need to watch anymore, it's all the same stuff. I'll let that set up some, and then I'll go ahead and do another layer. Then after that I can start sanding again. Let's see, little stuff like here, yeah. So I kind of got set back. I was trying to do a little bit too much at one time. Kind of got in a rush trying to videotape all this stuff at the same time too. So, but that's okay. This happens on a project. Don't let it get to you. You just keep on keeping at it. And it'll get done. So there it is, guys. Okay, guys. First layer is already dried and sanded. I like to take some fine sandpaper. It doesn't have to be wet. It's just dry. And what I did is I kind of sanded everything back to shape. This smooths things out and makes it easier to lay the Bondo putty down, so you don't have all these lips and valleys, and you don't have such a hard time in putting it on thicker than it needs to be. So as you can see, first layer's on. I might make it in two. This big hole over here, maybe not, but that's not a big deal. Like I said, this stuff dries really quick. So that's about it for all this fun stuff. I'll just do something else after this, or maybe take the rest of the day off. Hey guys, just a quick video here after my setback of about a week. I've got the tank repaired, well, the plug actually repaired, so I'm down to basically just a final sanding here before I start making the mold. So here it is on my 400 frame. So that's kind of what she looks like. Just want to do that because once I start sanding, she'll look kind of crappy. But just wanted you guys to see what she's going to look like. So that's about it. Hey guys, I just got finished doing the final sand before starting the molding. I just want to let you guys see why I use two different colors. You can always catch the high and low spots with these guys, and you can see where the toothpicks were a little bit low and some were a little bit high. So I finished off this with 320, wet and dry. This isn't hugely critical, just because we're going to actually be putting a coat of the separating agent, which makes a film. So this doesn't have to be exactly perfect because you can clean up a little bit in the mold. I just wanted to show you, you can see all this, you can see the scratches and repairs and stuff and all that kind of fun stuff around here. So that's kind of what it looks ugly, but she's actually nice and flat and smooth. So there we go. Hey guys, I'm here in my total mess of a fiberglassing section. So yes, it's a mess. It's always a mess. Fiberglassing is a mess. So all right, real quick now. I've got my separator. This is separator. You can probably see the shiny. I've sprayed on my separation solution. So that's all done. Now I'm getting ready to put on the secret sauce. Now, I came up with this years ago because I'm cheap, is one reason. The other reasons is gel coat is very expensive, and it's kind of brittle. I didn't like that, especially for molds and stuff like that, so I came up with my own stuff. Pretty darn simple, actually. I just get regular. Now I've only used Bondo, regular Bondo stuff, so I don't know if anything else works or not, but I use this and I mix 2/3 of Bondo and 1/3 of just regular standard poly fiberglass resin. And let's see. Yep, just regular old Bondo fiberglass resin. And this makes just thick enough to where it's paintable, so I can put a nice semi-thick coat on my parts, and then that way, when just like gel coat, when I put the fiberglass over it, the fiberglass meshing doesn't
come through, and when you start sanding it makes a mess and all that kind of fun stuff. So this should be enough. I'm going to have to do the tank in a couple of sections, top and bottom, and so if this isn't enough, we'll just make some more and see how that goes. As far as the hardener, regular fiberglass hardener, I forgot what they call it, but standard fiberglass hardener, it's really cold in here, that's why they have heater on and stuff. So I'll mix it up a little bit hot. Just a bit more. Just a little bit hot. I'll actually probably have to put it under the lights here. I use these 200-watt bulbs for heating in the winter time for setting this stuff up. And let's mix. Now this stuff you have to mix very thoroughly, or you're just going to get soft spots, obviously. So I don't know if you can see that or not. We'll see. But make sure you get all the area, even in the middle. Don't just stir in a circle. It's kind of nice when it's cooler. You don't have to be so quick about stuff. But make sure you get it all thoroughly done and mixed. Okay. That should be good. I use a regular cheapy Harbor Freight jobbies. So, time to paint. As you can see, it stays thick. Like I said, it doesn't have to be real thick, just thick enough to hold its body. Hey guys, I am back, and back in my fiberglassing booth. It's still a mess. There will probably always be a mess. I added my little tarp barrier here because my gal was, she didn't like the smell of fiberglass and Bondo and stuff for some reason. I love it. So I've sealed that off. I've got a vent up top there. Not a big deal. I'll be wearing a mask anyway, but so now I have a vapor barrier there. I need to put my mask on. Okay, I'm back. Got my masky on. So now it's time to lay some fiberglass. I've got my patterns all cut out here. And so, let's see which I'm going to do. I think I want to do this other side first. Okay, so I'll do that side first. This ended up more lumpy than I wanted it to be, except the top. That's kind of what it's supposed to look like. I just didn't use enough hardener,
And with the cold weather, it just took forever for this stuff to harden up. So when I finally heat soaked it, got it hard, and then put the bottom layer on, and you can see where it's a lot smoother because I just used more. I used more partner. So next up is our resin. You have to use what do they call this stuff? Polyester resin, because if you're using matte, I think I've said it before, the matte, whatever they glue it together with is only soluble in the polyester stuff. If you try to do it with epoxy type, it won't break down the glass, the glue in the glass, and it won't lay down. So you just have to use your polyester resin. Now, if you're not going to use all of it at once, I always put a plastic barrier on here, just because these caps really want to stick. Even kind of want to stick with the barriers on there. So I have to get my wrench out now. Here we go. But as you can see, this stuff likes to stick. So let's pop all this off. So we'll be good to go. Now it's a little bit more work, but I like to try not to mix up too much at a time, because you don't know when it's going to go off, especially when it's hot, unless you've been playing around. So I'm only going to mix up this smallish amount. Sometimes you have to experiment. It's a little bit warmer in here. I've had the heater going, so we've got heat there. And let's see. Okay. So let's see. Doesn't matter if it goes off real fast or not right now. So put that much in. We'll see how that works. I'm cheap, so I'll just use the other end of the stick. Actually, I can use the Bondo end of the stick. That doesn't matter. It's not going to hurt anything. Actually, I think I want to turn this around. So I will turn that around. Okay, got that turned around. Now, again, according to my other video doing the bottom side, I just take regular junky brushes, and I cut the bristles short so they'll be stiffer, so they'll be pushing in the pushing the glass down into any voids, things like that, so you don't get bubbles. Alright, so I'll start here. Okay. And it goes about there. Wraps around about there. Okay. Now I make 3 layers. My mold's out of 3 layers. That'll give it some flex, and it'll be strong enough to keep its shape. So any section you want to do, you need to do all 3 layers at once. So it becomes kind of difficult. Well, it actually becomes a lot easier to get air pockets and things like that. So Hey guys, ready for the next step here. I have removed the separator because this has to be a two-piece mold again. Now if you look here, there's a few ways to do it. I do it an easy way. I don't know if you can tell too well, but I've just used a carbide to put in all sorts of dimples here. Just a round burr. And basically that's for alignment. So this way when the parts go together, they're aligned when I bolt them together. So we have that. And so next, as in my other video, this is a separating agent. I use Pardol. Basically what this does is just make sure the fiberglass doesn't stick to each other. So I have to cover this side because fiberglass is going on the coating there, so I carefully tape that off, and now I'm just going to shoot this coating on in a few layers, let it dry, and then we'll be ready to start on building the second half of the mold. Now, depending on how you do this, some people like to wax their molds, and this will have a little tendency to fisheye with that, which is fine. What you do is you just put on a very thin coat and let it dry and build that up a few times before you put any thicker coats on. Now, this stuff doesn't have to be really thick as a separating agent, because it works so well. It can be like wafer thin and still work perfectly. It works so well that I don't even wax my mold. Make sure you get to the top. And just let that dry. Okay guys, this is what I call make or break in the molding process. Everything I made, I'm gonna break, except the mold obviously. So all those weeks of work building the plug is basically going to get destroyed. So this part's kind of scary sometimes, but either it works or it doesn't. So here we go. I don't know if you could tell a different sound, but when it breaks loose, it does sound differently when you tap on it. You know, you don't have to smack it hard. You're kind of getting a hollow sound. And there goes some cracking. Yay. And basically, guys, that's what it looks like after you make a giant mess. So, don't need to see both sides, but that's what it's like breaking out one of these molds. So, there you go. And of course, the one side I don't video basically just falls out in almost one piece. So, I have mold. I'm happy. And only one toothpick damage hole. There you go.